And let's slow this down and explain why residents are concerned about costs, right? Historic preservation standards often prioritize original materials, architectural consistency, historically accurate replacements. Sounds good philosophically, right? But in practice, it can get expensive fast. A modern vinyl replacement window may cost a fraction of a historically compliant wood-clad replica window. Historic brick restoration, more expensive. Custom trim, more expensive. Special roofing materials, more expensive. And in older Midwest housing stock, especially places dealing with weather, moisture, flooding, freeze-thaw cycles, maintenance costs are already brutal. So let me get this straight. People buy homes in a working class downriver community, maintain them for decades, survive inflation, flooding, insurance spikes, rising material costs, and now they're being told they may need permission from a commission just to change siding, windows, or even repair the exterior of their own home. So the story coming out of Flat Rock, Michigan is that city leaders proposed creating a large historic district covering a significant portion of the city. Residents showed up angry at the public hearing because the designation could require homeowners to get approval before doing certain exterior work on their own homes. These residents are actually worried about more red tape, higher construction costs, restrictions on materials, property taxes, insurance costs, difficulty selling homes later, and losing actual control over their own property. Meanwhile, supporters say the district is meant to preserve historic structures after Flat Rock lost its old high school building due to demolition in 2023. And after enough backlash, now officials are starting to talk about scaling back the proposal. Now, this Flat Rock historic debate isn't just about preserving history, it's about power, it's about property rights, and it's about who gets to decide what a neighborhood actually becomes. And to be honest, this conversation is happening all across America right now. Because on one side, you've got preservationists saying, hey, look, we need to protect the character of the city before developers and modern construction erase it. And on the other side, you have homeowners saying, hey, look, you're turning my house into a museum. And as somebody involved in real estate development, I can tell you right now, both sides actually have very valid points. But what nobody wants to talk about is the real issue underneath it all. America has an affordability crisis, a maintenance crisis, an infrastructure crisis, and increasingly a governance crisis. And historic districts sit right in the middle of it all.
A public hearing on a proposal to create a historic district in Flat Rock got heated at times as some residents pushed back on what would be a major change for homeowners. Michelle and Jim Whitwam live on Walnut Street in Flat Rock. Their home, which was built in the 1940s, is currently included in a proposal to turn a large portion of the city into a historic district.
I don't think they've thought about what it does to individual homeowners, the economic situation they're putting us in.
It would mean homeowners would have to get approval from the city's Historic Preservation Commission before doing any exterior work that requires a building permit. That includes regulations on the type of materials that can be used. So that's your street there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it stretches
well past Telegraph. It's half the city. We're already in a floodplain, so that adds to our cost. This cost of maintenance is about double for materials.
And this is why historic district conversations get emotional fast, because homeowners aren't hearing, we want to preserve history. Homeowners are hearing, your future repair bill just went up. That's the disconnect that planners and preservation advocates consistently underestimate. So let's talk about what a historic district is, because a lot of people hear historic district and think it just means putting up a cool sign. Nope. A historic district is a designated area where exterior changes to buildings may require review or approval to preserve architectural character. That can include windows, doors, roofing, siding, paint colors in some places, additions, demo, fences, porches, garages. And depending on the municipality, the rules can change from mild to extremely restrictive. Some districts are pretty flexible, while others are basically architectural HOA governments. But here's where I'm going to get somewhat controversial, because sometimes historic districts become less about preservation and more about socioeconomic filtering. Because the more expensive compliance becomes, the more difficult it becomes for working class residents to remain in place. That's the part people don't like discussing. Now, when it comes to homeowners needing to get approval before doing any exterior work that requires a building permit, this is where the average homeowner starts to panic, because anybody who has ever renovated property knows permits already take forever sometimes. And let's slow this down and explain why residents are concerned about costs, right? Historic preservation standards often prioritize original materials, architectural consistency, historically accurate replacements. Sounds good philosophically, right? But in practice, it can get expensive fast. A modern vinyl replacement window may cost a fraction of a historically compliant wood-clad replica window. Historic brick restoration, more expensive. Custom trim, more expensive. Special roofing materials, more expensive. And in older Midwest housing stock, especially places dealing with weather, moisture, flooding, freeze-thaw cycles, maintenance costs are already brutal. I actually live in Detroit's Rosedale Park, where you have homes that are close to 100 years old, including the property that I'm living in right now. And so from the homeowner and developer vantage point that I have, I understand both sides. I've actually worked on older buildings where preserving architectural character absolutely mattered. Once you destroy certain craftsmanship, streetscapes, historical identity, you cannot recreate it authentically. But you also cannot preservation regulate people into financial distress. Now, people watching this need to understand something important. Old buildings are not cheap to maintain. America romanticizes old architecture, but often forgets somebody has to pay for it. Now, when it comes to this homeowner's statement of this area being a designated floodplain, let's talk about that a little bit. Floodplain properties already face higher insurance premiums, more restrictive lending requirements, costlier repairs, FEMA compliance rules, and increased climate risk concerns. Now combine that with historic district requirements, and now suddenly even basic resilience upgrades become very hard to do. And that's actually a growing national problem, right? In places across the Midwest and East Coast, cities are struggling with a major contradiction. They want historic preservation, climate resilience, housing affordability, neighborhood stability, but many of those goals directly conflict with one another.
You don't get to vote on a historical district. If the city council decides they want it, then they want it.
At a public hearing on the proposal, homeowners voiced their concerns about how the designation would impact property taxes, homeowners insurance, and their ability to sell down the line.
One of the biggest mistakes cities make in planning and development is assuming technical correctness equals public legitimacy. It doesn't. You can have good intentions, smart planners, historically important structures, but if residents feel excluded, the project becomes politically toxic. I've seen this firsthand in the city of Detroit. Community engagement cannot be performative. People need to feel heard, included, respected, financially protected, especially when we're talking about somebody's home. But let me stir the pot for a second, because sometimes cities use historic designation because they failed to proactively preserve buildings in the past. So instead of strategic preservation planning, they react emotionally after losing a landmark.
Leslie Harkeye, the chair of the Historic District Study Committee, says the idea for a historic district came about after the former Flat Rock High School was demolished in 2023. She says the district was designed around at-risk historic structures in hopes of preserving them.
There's clearly some places that they don't want it, and then there's other places where there has been very positive feedback.
She says the committee will go back to the drawing board and look at redesigning which areas would be included.
We're hopeful that the process will continue, whether it be redistricting and redrawing those lines, maybe for a smaller district or something that's more targeted.
And this is the emotional core of the preservation side, because once a historic structure is demolished, it's gone forever. You can't rebuild authentic history. Historic districts are often created to protect architectural identity, stabilize neighborhood character, prevent demolition, encourage tourism, increase civic pride, preserve craftsmanship, maintain long-term visual cohesion. And statistically, some historic districts actually do outperform surrounding neighborhoods in property value appreciation. But here's the catch. That appreciation can also contribute to affordability problems. Now, when it comes to real estate developers and investors, we often love historic districts because they create predictability, limit ugly or incompatible development, protect neighborhood aesthetics, and can stabilize long-term values. But owner-occupants, especially middle-income homeowners, they often see restrictions, costs, delays, bureaucracy. Now in Detroit, we've seen both sides of this. Some historic neighborhoods became incredibly desirable because protections maintained their identity. Other areas, people struggled with compliance costs while dealing with aging infrastructure and economic hardship. Now, redrawing it to potentially a smaller district, that sounds like a pretty good compromise because half of the city, quote unquote, sounded way too aggressive. But this is where smart urban planning matters, right? Blanket policies usually create backlash. Targeted preservation, that's a bit different. Some solutions could be preserving truly significant structures, creating voluntary overlay zones, offering tax credits, providing repair grants, subsidizing compliant materials, instead of simply regulating homeowners harder. Here's something a lot of viewers may not know. Historic preservation projects can qualify for federal housing tax credits, state historic tax credits, brownfield incentives, preservation grants. These tools can help developers finance restoration projects. But single-family homeowners often don't have access to enough assistance to offset the added costs.
This proposal is still a long way from being finalized. It would have to be recommended by the City Planning Commission and then head to the City Council for approval. Right now, there's no timeline on when it could be brought to a vote.
Now, if cities really care about preservation, they need to put money behind it. You cannot tell residents, protect history for the public good while privately shifting all of the financial burden onto homeowners. But from a development perspective, this story highlights a broader challenge across the Midwest. We are trying to preserve aging housing stock built for a completely different economic era. Many of the homes in our communities need things like major infrastructure upgrades. Were built before modern energy standards. They require expensive maintenance. They face climate risks. And they also sit in communities with stagnant incomes. So every additional regulation matters financially. And let's be honest, half of the people at that meeting probably walked in thinking, wait, you're telling me I need permission to fix my porch on my house with my money? But let's talk about the irony here, right? Because America has spent decades demolishing historic neighborhoods for highways, parking lots, suburban expansion, and urban renewal. Now, all of a sudden, we're acting shocked people are sensitive about preservation. But this debate isn't really about Flat Rock, right? This is about the future of older American communities. How do we preserve identity without freezing neighborhoods in time? Protect architecture without pricing residents out, encourage investment without over-regulating maintenance, respect homeowners while also protecting community character. At the end of the day, this is exactly why development conversations are never simple. Cities are emotional. Homes are emotional. History is emotional. And when government regulation touches private property, people pay attention real quick. Personally, I think preservation matters. Character matters. History matters. But if cities want residents to buy into preservation, they better come with flexibility, incentives, transparency, and real financial support. Otherwise, historic districts risk becoming yet another good example of good intentions colliding with economic reality. Question for you, would you actually support your neighborhood becoming a historic district, or would you actually see that as government overreach? And especially for homeowners, would preserving neighborhood character be worth potentially higher costs and more restrictions? Drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I also have a Patreon community. Link is also in the description below. Would love to welcome you over there. There are paid tiers, but there's also a free tier. And my goal is to provide you real low-level value when it comes to entrepreneurship, real estate development. Would love to see you over there as well. See you in the next video.